Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Robbins, and my husband Jason and I just finished directing the Banja Luka GP 2023. And we just wanted to film a couple videos and walk you through the details of our trip, just if there's any helpful information, tips, things we would change. And so today I'm going to be walking through the schedule that we did and just how our program ran week to week. So I have a schedule template I created. It's on in a Google Drive that along with all of our other documents from directing the GP that we would be happy to share with any future directors. But this is a pretty helpful schedule template. I built off the schedule that we used last year and just made it, tweaked it, made it a little more like clear and put it all on one document so that you can just click through the whole trip side by side on one Excel sheet. So I'm just going to walk through that. I'll tell you any notes I have, any things we would change, and just any insights we have about our time. So this first page, we started with a stateside orientation in Salt Lake City, Utah. We hosted the team at the Salt Lake InterVarsity House. So everyone arrived at the Salt Lake City airport and we picked them up and brought them to the house. We did Salt Lake largely because over half of our team was from Utah within 45 minutes of Salt Lake. And Chase and I live in Salt Lake. So it was an easy central place to come. There's also a really easy direct flight from Salt Lake City to Amsterdam that gets you to Zagreb, which is your final destination, pretty smoothly. So Salt Lake was a great orientation spot. The house was fun. It was cramped. It definitely created some cross-cultural, in some dissonance right off the bat. With a bigger team, you'll likely need to utilize a hotel or a large Airbnb. But for a smaller team, the Salt Lake house worked really well. So everyone got settled at the house. We had beds set up all over the place. We had them in with roommates and we started with a dinner. So I even included what we did for food. We had a great amount of food and people really enjoyed it. So I did a crock pot sweet pork the first night. Everyone got plenty and they just sat in their small groups for the first dinner and just got to know each other. So that was the first time they met their assigned small groups, got to spend some time getting to know each other, and that was really great. Then we go into our sessions. We just, you can see on the schedule how we broke down session one. And then we did have a hard quiet hour at 11 p.m. and started the next morning with breakfast. The staff, we all teamed up to make the meals together. And then we would have students do cleanup after each meal. Different small groups took cleanup after each meal. So staff would get up, we'd cook breakfast. We did a big session in the morning. We did lunch, which included our student of color gathering, our first student of color gathering. We did another session after lunch, kind of going through all the things that are in orientation in the GP journal. And then we had a free time where we actually sent our small groups out into the city by foot, like they'll get that, like they were going to do in Banja Luka, and we sent them to various coffee shops. And this was a really fun way where they got to bond with each other. They were telling each other their stories, and they kind of got used to the feel of walking around and drinking coffee with friends. So it was a really good kind of precursor to the trip and what they would be doing in Banja Luka. On our schedule, we put dinner out. We were planning on and hoping to be able to go to a Bosnian restaurant in Salt Lake City. There are a couple, but the logistics just didn't work out. So we ended up doing dinner at the InterVarsity House again, and we just did the spicy Thai noodles. We had another session in the evening, watched a movie together that had some themes of crossing culture and redlining and greenlining, just to help kind of intro that. And then Sunday, we went to church together. We had our last session, which was primarily our teen covenant. And then we left for the airport. We took the train to the airport all together, and it was pretty smooth and simple. So my biggest notes on orientation were that it would be ideal to take the earlier flight out of Salt Lake City on Sunday. There's one that leaves around 5 p.m., I believe. And that gets you to Zagreb, which then gets you to Banja Luka at a much more reasonable hour than what we did. We did the later flight partially due to budget, but also due to like making sure we had enough time to get everything done. My easiest recommendation for this, which you can see in my notes below, is starting one night earlier so that Sunday morning is really just getting ready to leave. Whether that means going to church or just waking up, having breakfast together, maybe doing one session and going to the airport. That would be potentially another option of this model would be if you cut out going to church, you could do this last session in the morning and then just leave for the airport right after that. So that's two solutions to maybe get on that earlier flight. It worked out just fine. Travel was really smooth. The benefit of the later flight was that more people slept because we left at 9 p.m. It was a more natural going into their sleep rhythm. So things to think about. It's good to check in with Justin with Golden Rule on how significantly cheaper the later flight is as well. But other than that, we felt orientation went really smooth. We loved having a stateside orientation. We felt like we got a lot of the big topics out of the way before they were jet lag, which we really appreciated. And it gave a lot more space for countryside orientation to be a lot slower and smoother for them. So going into week 2, we arrived late on Monday, May 22nd. And so we let the team sleep in. We did a later breakfast at the hostel starting at 10:30. This was great. We just gave them the morning to settle in. And at noon, we came and got them to take them to the church for their first orientation session. And the AU's team did an incredible week of orientation. Everything in purple on Tuesday through Thursday was led by them, and everything in blue on Tuesday through Thursday was led by us. So most of the sessions were led by them, and they did a great job. We took it a lot slower, gave a lot more breaks just to account for jet lag, and that really helped a lot. The main thing we realized was that these after lunch sessions can be really hard. That's where we see the most tiredness and the people kind of dozing off or falling asleep. So the recommendation from us and the AU's team was to do more interactive things after lunch. So even looking at this schedule, potentially on Wednesday, it would have been better to put the STEM game we did right after lunch and then Sanisha's testimony before dinner, just to kind of keep them moving and keep their energy up once they've eaten. The food they eat during orientation week is heavy and filling and definitely makes you tired. So I think it's good to be mindful of their energy. We did a half Sabbath on Friday for the first week where we spent the morning just introing how to Sabbath and why to Sabbath, and kind of prepared them for that. This was really nice because, this week is slower, so it's not like they're as drained, but it also launched them into Sabbath with a lot of intentionality of how they were going about it. Some other general notes about the schedule just from this is we started each morning with a daily prayer meeting. We did that starting on Wednesday. And then on Saturday, we actually went to campus and did a prayer walk. One idea that has been posed as opposed to doing this morning prayer walk and as opposed to doing rafting, which we didn't end up doing, is to actually take the whole team on the Bon hike, which is an overlook that looks over Banja Luka. It's really popular with local students. Most students will end up doing it with a friend, but we had a couple of students suggest doing that on this last day of orientation, just to see the city, see something that's really popular with young people, but also take it as an opportunity to pray and to pray over the city and to pray for the week. So that's one option to do on this last day of orientation that I thought was a really cool idea. Also, this last day of orientation, typically, at least the last 2 years, there's been a festival called MotoFest. It's a music festival, mostly catered towards motorcyclists, but it's really popular with the locals. And actually, a lot of our contacts that ended up coming to Bible study and being spiritually curious, we met at MotoFest. So we think this is a worthwhile cultural experience. It's a concert inside their large castle, and it's really fun. So that's kind of a note for the end of orientation. This whole week, we eat our meals, lunch and dinner at a local restaurant that's really close to the church. They're a catering style restaurant. So Lilia will set up as many meals as you want there. So you just need to tell her when you want to start having meals there and how many you want to have, and they will happily accommodate to our needs. Chasen went through the cost of that, but it's a really good meal and it's traditional Bosnian food. So it's a really good way to get students comfortable with the local cuisine. So going forward from there on week 2, this is when we got into usual ministry. We keep having breakfast at the hostel. Students did that all summer. Staff that were staying at the church, we had the option to go to breakfast or to go to just a local bakery. And we would probably say, I would say Chasen and I ate breakfast at the hostel 30 to 40% of the time, and then our other staff probably 50% of the time, 50 to 70. So this is a pretty normal routine. The first couple of weeks, Lilia will likely set up some cultural exchanges with the different university faculties. So the first week we went to the science faculty and did a day where Monday we shared our culture and Tuesday they shared their culture. And this was a great way to meet students and to continue to further the relationship that AUS has with the university. So these are just wins of an event. This does take out your morning session that often was our normal rhythm. So just to note that those will interrupt that. Starting on Monday, we began eating lunch and dinner in the dining hall. Initially, I put this in the notes below. We had 2 shifts for each meal, and we encourage students to not overcrowd the dining hall, to go at different times. But truthfully, the dining hall was really busy. And every time we went in there was plenty of students to talk to, plenty of tables to sit at. And honestly, most of the tables were full, meaning our students had to split up and sit with locals anyway. So we ended up after this first week doing away with the 2 shifts for meals. But we did try that, and potentially with a bigger team, this would be a good way to do it, is having staff and leaders assigned to different times where they can be in charge of making sure people's meals get paid for. We started events this week. So we did 2 events a week. What AUS asked was that we would do them on Wednesday and Saturday. And so that could be the same next year, in future years, but I would just ask Lilia and the team what would be best for them. So on these days, students, we recommend them being at the church actually at 5:30, which means they eat dinner at a local bakery and then they're there to get ready for the event. This just gives them plenty of time to set up, buy snacks, pray, delegate roles, and prepare for the evening to start at 7 p.m. Local students do tend to show up a little bit early, especially when they're excited about the event. So it's good to be ready to go by 6:30, 6:45 for students to show up. For the events, Chasen and I there would be 1 AU staff in charge of each event, and then one of our staff or student leaders in charge of each event. And these were our point people. So that way, not all staff have to be at every event, but we know that someone is there and in charge and making sure it's happening. And this worked really well. So we just let staff kind of choose the events they are most excited about and kind of went from there. Student sign up, there's a couple ways you can do this. You can ask them to volunteer. You can do it first come, first serve on a sign up sheet, or you can just assign based on interests students have. We did a mix of all of those. So those are events. And I'll walk through in a little bit each event and what we thought of it once I go through more schedule details. So another thing that we would do is, like I said, we started a daily prayer meeting during orientation. And that first week, we actually had our staff, including Chasen and I, share our 3-minute testimonies with the students, just either a testimony of our life and our relationship with Jesus, or over a specific moment in our life, just to model sharing your story and give them just more examples of what that could look like. But this inspired us to actually have every student on the team share their 3-minute story over the course of the summer. So what we did is we would take about 15 minutes each morning to have 2 students share their 3 to 5 minute testimony. And then they would lead a 15 to 20-minute prayer meeting for the team. So Dee and Zach shared their testimony, and then they led a short prayer meeting for the room. And so what this did was it allowed each student to share their testimony, and it allowed each student to try and practice leading a prayer meeting and equip them for doing that back home as well. And this was a really good rhythm and space. Another thing you utilize the mornings for is your Philippians study. We had them led by each staff led a study, and then any student leader that wanted to lead a study. Jason took on the role of prepping those Bible studies with each person, and just kind of took an hour with each of us to walk us through and just make sure we were staying cohesive with the theme and really hitting the points we wanted to. The last weekly rhythm that I think we need to touch on, two more, is Cafe Ictus. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, typically, we started with the first Thursday and then did Tuesday and Thursday from there. It's just a time where at the church, the cafe is open as a space for mingling and hanging out, for students to bring their local friends to meet Haley and Keita, the AU staff, and kind of get connected to the ministry and have spiritual conversations, but also just get familiar with the building, where it's located, for when in the future they're invited to events or Bible studies. So we have about 3 to 4 students that are there kind of hosting each Cafe Ictus. They don't go to lunch on campus those days. Instead, they'll either walk back from campus or just stay after the Philippians study, go to a local bakery, spend about 4 to 5 marks on a lunch, and then hang out at the cafe to get ready. And that worked really well. And that was a good rhythm for the students and the staff. If needed, if they are on campus, Keita has a pretty large car and was able to drive students from campus to Cafe Ictus when needed. So just note that. The final rhythm after events, Cafe Ictus, and our morning sessions is Bible study. So the AU's team has had a Bible study going on and off since we left last summer. And the time that they had found was working best was Sunday afternoons at 2 p.m. So that was decided before we arrived, and we were just kind of jumping into their established Bible study. So this summer they were studying Who is Jesus from 2 to 4 every Sunday. This first Sunday, we just hadn't really met anyone. Well, not this Sunday. The Sunday at the end of orientation week was their first Bible study of the summer. We didn't really invite anyone because we hadn't met anyone yet, except for the people that were at MotoFest the night before. So that was really just them with their involved students. And we did send 2 student leaders just kind of as American partners for the summer with that Bible study. But over the course of the summer, each week, more and more students, local students, and more of our students attended each one. We did find, well, I'll share that at the end. So that is kind of a general week of everything that can happen. But this is a great thing to just use this schedule and talk with Lilia through just all the potentials of each week. One thing we didn't regularly schedule, which I think we should have, is our team meeting with the AU staff. Lilia and us as directors really appreciated having a couple hours each week that we can sit down with the 4 women on the AU's team and all of our staff to talk through any problems that have come up, any conflicts, any schedule details for the following week, and to even just debrief and reflect on the week before. So this was a really good rhythm. But when we don't schedule it, it made it really hard to find time for it. So I highly recommend building that into your schedule as you're preparing for the trip. Here's week 3. This is very similar. We had one day at the English faculty. We had a couple of Philippian sessions. We did Cafe Ictus on both Tuesday and Thursday. And you'll see here, we dropped down to just 1 staff or student leader being assigned for each lunch. Each student leader and staff got a meal card that had a certain amount of money on it. And they would just take that card with them to the dining hall and pass it around to students to swipe when they would get their food. It's really, really simple. Lilia can show you how to do that. And we've built a pretty good rapport with the lunch ladies, and it's been really smooth. So that's how meals have worked. We built in a staff and student color gathering. They just went and got dessert and just debriefed how they've been feeling after a full week of ministry, any situations that had come up. We still did prayer meetings and testimonies. This week we did 2 more events, and we added a session of intercessory prayer before Bible study, just anticipating this was the first Bible study we were bringing students to, and we just wanted to make space for prayer. So we would do that in the kind of the upper conference room, kind of away from the hustle and bustle. As students started to arrive, we weren't like disturbing the Bible study or weirding anyone out, but we were up there. So then our final week looks very similar. We didn't have any campus activities, so we were just doing our typical morning sessions, either Philippians or small group or reflections, details, things like that. Cafe Ictus like normal, 2 events like normal. It only got interesting on Saturday. We did a longer morning session, and we made our last meal in the dining hall dinner on Thursday because we needed to pay before we left, but the payment office is not open on the weekend. So that is something to be aware of if you are leaving on a Sunday or a Saturday, that you're going to want to pay for. You need to get your bill for the dining halls on Friday, which means you can't eat any meals after Friday. So just be aware of that as you're planning your schedule, that you will need to account for food for Friday and Saturday, because you won't be able to go to the dining hall. So that's just a note. So on Saturday we did a Philippian study. We took up an offering for the local team. We took some time, invited the AU staff, and shared some stories about just what these students had experienced, the spiritual conversations they've had. And then we took some group photos. Especially this was important to take photos with the AU's team and just include them, make sure we got a group photo, staff photos, and any photos students wanted. Then we sent them off with a certain amount of money to go grab lunch, either at a local bakery or get burek. And then they had free time in the afternoon to go have last coffees, last hangouts with their friends. And then they came back to the church at 5:30, and we had pizza there for them for dinner. This worked really well. It kind of gathered them all back up to get ready for the going away party. And then we allowed, we had people help us set up for the going away party. This year for the going away party, we made it more of a focused like cafe feel. So we set up chairs and little tables. We made a photo slideshow of all of our photos from the month and had that playing. We asked 5 of our students to share briefly, like 3-minute testimony of the summer, just what they experienced and how it impacted them. It was really beautiful. And we actually also invited, if any locals wanted to share, that we opened up the mic, and we had about 5 locals share just the impact that the summer had made on them. And it was really beautiful as well. And then we just opened it up for people to hang out. We had a photo booth, and it was just a really sweet time of saying goodbye. And yeah, people hung out late into the night. So our final day, we did leave later. So we left after church so that we would be able to go to one last church session or church gathering. And right after church, the bus arrived at the church to pick us up. We got chicken sandwiches. We got chicken sandwiches every week after lunch and ate them at the church. So we got our chicken sandwiches. We got on the bus. The bus took us to the hostel to pick up all of our bags. And we loaded the bus and headed to Mostar. We had about a 4 or 5 hour drive to Mostar, and stayed in a motel there. We had students just bring like a backpack for the night, so we didn't have to fully unload the bus. They had dinner in small groups in Mostar and got to enjoy the city and just look around for the night. And then finally on Monday morning, we had free time in Mostar in the morning, and we left for Dubrovnik around 11 a.m. We arrived at Dubrovnik right on time for check-in at 3 p.m. We got people settled at the Airbnb and then had our first meal here. For debrief, I highly encourage utilizing the Airbnb host to cook meals. This was a huge money saver, and it was really quality food. So lots of food, good portions, really delicious. So she cooked us 5 meals while we were here, 2 dinners and 3 lunches, and this worked really well. So we did an intro to debrief. We spent 3 of the mornings in quiet reflection. So they got a total of 9 hours of silence during debrief, which was really great. We had small group time each day, aside from the boat day where they talked about their quiet time. And then we had 2 days of free time where they were free to do whatever they wanted around the local cove. We had we had multiple large group sessions. One was a full-on large group session where we talked about bringing it back to campus. We did 2 optional sessions, one on calling and one on women in ministry. And then we did a couple of detail sessions, just preparing them for what was coming each of the next days. So something I wrote in my notes down below is I highly recommend sandwiching your fun days in the middle of debrief so that you have a full day at the beginning to get people settled into the rhythm of debrief. Then you have a full day at the end to wrap up and have a team celebration dinner and chapter time to close debrief. So what we did is on Wednesday, we did a 3-island boat tour. Jason talked about how to get in contact with the owner for that. This went from honestly like 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. So it's a big full day, but it's really relaxing, really beautiful. And it's just pure fun. And then we came back and had dinner at the Airbnb and just did details for the next morning. So that morning we did a normal session, like quiet time, all of that. We had lunch, and then right after lunch, shuttles picked us up and took us to Dubrovnik for the afternoon. What we would recommend is when arriving in Dubrovnik, going to this specific swimming spot. There is a beach and it's rather crowded, but if you just go into the city, go out of the like side gates and kind of walk around, there's a whole swimming area. It's not a beach, but there's places to sit, places to jump into the water, swim around. It's really beautiful. And we recommend doing that first when you arrive in Dubrovnik because it's going to be very hot. And the heat of the day here really is from like 2 to 4 is where it's absolute most unbearably hot. So we started with swimming, and then at 3:34 we got dried off, changed, and head into the city to just hang out. Students did whatever they wanted. They could go to museums, they could go on a walking tour, they could just walk around themselves. They didn't need to be in small groups. We gave them each €20 for dinner and coffee or dinner and ice cream, and that totally covered what they needed. And we just had them meet back at the main gate, or not the main gate, the side gate at 9 p.m. to be shuttled back. And I think this was a great amount of time in Dubrovnik. Some people probably could have done less. Some people really would have loved more. So it seemed like a good medium to just spend the whole afternoon there. And this last day, we just really enjoyed free time. And then we did a celebration dinner at a local restaurant. We ended up doing it at the one directly next to the Airbnb, and it was really fabulous. We got meat platters and fish platters and just kind of family style, enjoyed that. During this time, we had people share just what they most appreciate about the team and what has been the biggest impact. Then we go out to the dock. We have everyone dressed nice, and we take big group photos, team photos, small group photos, and all of that. So people have nice photos to remember the trip by. And then we closed out with having chapter time for about 45 minutes, where in their chapters, students could be sharing about just how they're taking it back, how they want to take it back to campus to pray for each other and bless each other as they're returning. Then we just did a final note on reentry, a blessing over them, and gave them details for departing the next morning. So I know that's a lot. I have included notes on every page of my document, kind of talking about what my recommendations are, what we would change. But overall, we felt very happy with our schedule and would use this schedule again. Of course, it's a GP, everything's subject to change depending on the year, depending on the circumstance, and depending on the team. But I hope this serves as a really good template for what you might want to look for and what you might want to plan on as you're preparing for your GP. So thanks for listening. I hope this is helpful, and feel free to reach out to me at kelly.robbins@intervarsity.org if you have any schedule questions at all. Thanks, guys.